It was late in the autumn of 1977 when Captain David L. Stevens, a U.S. Air Force pilot stationed at RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, England, took off for what should have been a routine flight. The Cold War was at its height. Tension hung like a static charge in the air. Every mission carried an undertone of unease, every radar blip a potential spark that could ignite something greater. Stevens had flown dozens of sorties before, intercept missions, weather runs, and high-altitude patrols over the North Sea. But this one would stay with him forever. The early morning sky was pale and sharp, the kind of cold that numbs the fingertips through the gloves. He taxied down the runway at 0600 hours in an F-4 Phantom, a machine he knew like the back of his hand. As his engines roared to life, a deep vibration rolled through the tarmac. The control tower gave him clearance, and in seconds, he was climbing into the gray expanse above the English coast, breaking through layers of thin cloud until only blue sky and sunlight remained. For the first 20 minutes, everything was by the book. His altitude, 32,000 feet. Airspeed, steady at 460 knots. Instruments read normal, and his radar sweep showed nothing but clean airspace. But then, a voice crackled through the radio. Ground control at Bentwaters reporting an unidentified return. Echo 4-1, be advised, we're picking up a contact 10 miles north of your position, no transponder. Stevens checked his radar. Nothing. He assumed a glitch. But control repeated the alert. This time the voice carried an edge. It's moving fast, sir. Closing in. He looked over his right shoulder and saw it. Or thought he did. At first it was just a shadow. A dense smudge against the sunlight. He blinked, assuming it was a reflection, maybe a trick of glare. But the shape held. Dark, solid, moving in parallel with him. It wasn't a jet. Not by any configuration he knew. There were no contrails, no visible wings, no shape that made mechanical sense. Just an absence of light, following his plane as if tethered to it by something unseen. Stevens banked left, descending slightly, trying to test whether the thing would respond. It did. Perfectly. Every movement he made the shadow matched, not a second behind. His pulse rose. Control, I've got visual, he said. Object is dark, no lights, no identifiable markings. It's maintaining formation. The air traffic controller went silent for a beat, then responded, Echo 4-1, confirm you're not seeing a refraction, a mirror reflection from your fuselage? Stevens didn't answer right away. The shadow was moving closer. At 31,000 feet, he realized something else. His radar was now blank, completely blank. The entire scope, dead. His communications cut for 2 seconds, then came back. He tried again to call it in, his voice tighter now. Bentwaters, my instruments are fluctuating. I'm losing systems. There was a hiss, then silence. For the next 12 minutes, Captain Stevens was completely alone. The shadow stayed at his 6 o'clock, occasionally drifting to the right, then back again. When he turned toward the coastline, it followed. When he climbed, it climbed. When he dropped altitude sharply in a test dive, it dove with him. Not once did it overtake or fall behind. He could feel the pressure in his chest tightening, the surreal realization that he was in the sky with something intelligent, aware, and interested. When communication returned, he was already 30 miles off course. The voice from ground control came through with static, but clear enough to hear panic. Echo 4-1, radar shows you've been off our scope for 12 minutes. Do you copy? He did, and immediately requested return clearance. He banked left, but as he turned toward base, he caught something at the edge of his canopy. The shadow wasn't there anymore. Then, without warning, his aircraft jolted as if something had passed directly beneath it. The altimeter spiked, the Phantom shuddered violently, and a deep mechanical groan filled the cockpit. He pulled hard on the stick, struggling to stabilize. And then, silence again. The hum of his engines returned, but the sense that something had moved through the air around him remained, like static electricity crawling across his skin. He landed 30 minutes later, visibly shaken. Maintenance crews examined the aircraft and found no mechanical faults. The radar system, however, showed signs of what engineers described as a magnetic interference pattern, something they said could only be caused by an intense electromagnetic field within close proximity. When debriefed, Stevens gave his statement under oath. He said, "It followed me. Not like a reflection, like it was alive. It reacted to me." His superiors were skeptical, but cautious. Over the following weeks, at least 3 other pilots out of Bentwaters and 2 from nearby RAF Woodbridge reported similar phenomena, dark objects or shadows trailing their jets at high altitudes, sometimes visible to the naked eye, but not appearing on radar. By 1978, these incidents had quietly drawn the attention of US and British intelligence. Files later declassified under the UK's Ministry of Defence archives, specifically the UAP-DFR, or Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Defence File reports, referenced a handful of such sightings, including one that matched Stevens' report nearly word for word. It described a pilot in F-4 aircraft reporting visual of a black silhouette maintaining perfect formation, radar inoperative, for 12 minutes. In official summaries, the explanation was listed as optical phenomena caused by a temperature inversion, but many aviation experts disagreed. Inversions could create mirages, yes, but they couldn't trail a jet for miles nor disrupt radar systems. Captain Stevens retired in 1983, quietly. In interviews years later, he still described that day as vividly as if it had happened yesterday. "You know when you're being watched," he said in a 1992 interview for Flightline magazine. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to, and I think it saw me too." Others backed him up. Lieutenant Mark Hanley, who served in the radar room that morning, recalled that the echo on their screen appeared, disappeared, then locked on to Stevens' flight path for nearly 10 miles before fading completely. When asked why this wasn't made public, he laughed softly. "It was the Cold War. You didn't talk about what you couldn't explain." Some researchers today link Stevens' encounter to the Bentwaters Woodbridge phenomena, a series of mysterious aerial incidents in eastern England between 1977 and 1980, the most famous being the Rendlesham Forest incident, often called Britain's Roswell. Though that event took place 3 years later, similarities are eerie. Electromagnetic interference, radar failures, and reports of dark, silent objects maneuvering with precision far beyond conventional aircraft. Whether what Stevens saw was experimental, a classified craft, or something not of this world, remains unresolved. Officially, the U.S. Air Force closed its investigation by the mid-1980s, citing no evidence of threat to national security. But quietly, in military circles, the story lived on. Airmen whispered about the shadow planes, the ones that could appear beside you, fly in silence, then vanish without trace. Stevens' flight log from that day, November 17, 1977, still exists. On the last line of the report, written in his own hand, are 6 simple words: visual contact, object unknown, still following. He never elaborated further. Years later, after his passing in 2009, his daughter found a cassette among his belongings. The label read simply, "Bentwaters, Shadow Flight." On it was his voice, recorded decades earlier, describing what he saw. His tone was calm, deliberate, the voice of a man trained to control fear. "If I imagined it, then why did the instruments fail? Why did radar track it? I know what I saw. And whatever it was, it wanted to be seen." That tape remains in private possession. Aviation historians who've heard excerpts describe it as one of the most compelling first-person pilot accounts ever recorded. And even now, among Air Force veterans, his name carries a quiet reverence, not because he was the first to see something unexplainable, but because he had the courage to admit it. Perhaps that's what the story of Captain Stevens truly is, Not a tale about UFOs or secret weapons, but about what happens when a disciplined mind meets the unknown. A man trained to trust data, procedure, and logic, forced to confront something that didn't fit any of those categories. Even in death, his mystery lingers. Because for all our advances in radar, satellites, and infrared tracking, the skies still hold their secrets. And somewhere above those gray clouds off the coast of England, maybe, just maybe, the shadow that followed him is still out there, waiting for another pilot to notice.